Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Gabrielle Smith from the Department of Mathematics at Hampton University, and I'm excited to present to you a modeling process framework for addressing undernutrition through agriculture. Now, undernutrition has been a global health challenge for decades with serious consequences for children under 5 in particular, and agricultural development is a frequently targeted pathway to improve nutritional outcomes. Unfortunately, our understanding of these connections between food production and child health are limited by an evidence gap, which means there's an urgent need for more analytical approaches to clarify these pathways, especially if we're to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So where are our current interventions failing? Well, health and agriculture sectors often operate with limited coordination, with program evaluations typically monitoring yields and outcomes instead of health outcomes or diet quality. So analyses that focus on this concept of nutrition-sensitive agriculture are needed to integrate things like consumption patterns and food allocation into intervention design and evaluations. This becomes even more important given that policymakers, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where undernutrition is most prevalent, frequently require clearer evidence-based strategies before disseminating any sort of intervention funds. So this brings us to the framework, which allows us to generate evidence for intervention design. In this framework, we start by framing the problem and its system, collecting any sort of representative data, going on to quantify these pathways connecting agricultural productivity to nutritional outcomes so that we can then use those simulated pathways to test strategic intervention points in the system and then extract evidence and insight for effective intervention design. So to demonstrate how one can identify strategic points in a system like this, we perform an illustrative case study on smallholder dairy farms in Uganda to represent a rural agricultural dependent setting. And using 5 years of data from a national demographic survey, we connect indicators over here, which we see on the left, leading milk production to dairy sales and the direct consumption of milk, as well as household income, dietary diversity, health expenditures, all leading to the presence of a stunted child under 5 in the household. And our analysis of this simulated system reveals the following key findings to us. First, from our path analysis illustrated on the left here, we find that it's not enough for households to produce more milk. They need to consume more milk as well. We found through this analysis that consuming an additional cup of milk per household per week corresponded to a 9% reduction in the likelihood of stunting, and that any of the income-related pathways, i.e. this bottom path here in the figure, had small and insignificant effects on nutrition. And from our sensitivity analyses, part of that system testing component of the framework, we find more of the same, that improvements in consumption through improved production were linked to consistent and significant reductions in the likelihood of stunting, that improvements in dairy sales or income alone had no significant effects on the likelihood of stunting. Thus, access to and the consumption of nutrient-dense foods is more impactful than increased market participation alone. So what are some of these implications? Well, overall, we find that agricultural productivity alone is not enough to improve nutritional outcomes, and that interventions that include or target consumption outcomes are likely to be more effective than solely income-based interventions, and that nutrition-sensitive agricultural programs can use methods like this in this framework to set targets and monitor outcomes, which then allow them to have domain experts develop more socially and contextually relevant interventions. And like with most modeling approaches, this approach allows us to inform intervention design before any sort of costly implementations or trials. However, you do have to take this information with a grain of salt because this was only an illustrative case study. So the quality and format of the publicly available data set that we found posed significant challenges to both the system framing and path analysis. So improved interdisciplinary data systems that integrate data across both agricultural and health systems would greatly strengthen any sort of analyses performed through a framework like this. And with that, I would like to thank you all for watching, and I'd like to invite you to come visit me and chat at the poster session. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.